get started with our NSC meeting now that we have met quorum.
Yes.
Sit very, very far away from us, Sergio.
Just to make it funny.
All right, so we've met quorum with Councilmember Jimenez and Councilmember Esparza. All right, so let's look at review of work plan. We have item.
So before we get to that, Chair, I would just like to, Angel Rios, your committee staff and Deputy City Manager, sends his regrets that he's not here today, but he is deployed to the Emergency Operations Center as the Operations Chief. And again, for those in the audience, we are exercising social distancing today and trying to keep everybody safe from the COVID-19. If you are here to address the committee, please do not touch the microphone. And for staff, please, use good health measures as you trade places. So, thanks so much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Michelle. So I have a request for a deferral for the review of the work plan. Is there a motion?
Move to defer?
Second.
Wonderful. All say aye. All those in agreement? Opposed? Okay, so that moves forward. Now we're going to go into, there's nothing under consent calendar, so we're going to move into the reports to the committee, and the first one being item 1, draft of the 5-year consolidated plan.
Chair, can I ask a question before we get started?
Let me check with my attorney.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
No, I mean, it's a serious question. If I go to the restroom while we're hearing this, we don't necessarily lose quorum, right? Okay.
All right, we'll move forward with the presentation.
Very conscientious.
Great. Hi, I'm Jackie Morales-Ferrand. I am the Director of Housing. I'm joined here by our Grants Manager, Shirley Victorio, and our consultant who provided much of the research and background on the plan, who is Natalie Dean. So first of all, just to remind you, what is the Consolidated Plan? Every 5 years, we're required to put together a 5-year plan that brings together all of our federal funding sources to outline what our priorities of investment are. And as you can see, we get, because of how large we are and the demographics of our community, we are funded directly through HUD, and we receive money for the Community Development Block Grant, the and let me start back. The Community Development Block Grant Program, known as CDBG, in which we can fund affordable housing activities, public service activities, and really what it's mostly known for is for infrastructure investments. It's for capital costs is really what CDBG is typically used for. Then the Home Program, which is used for affordable housing. The Housing Opportunities for Persons with AIDS, which is known as HOPWA, is known for providing housing for people with AIDS. And then the Emergency Solutions Grant Program, which is ESG, is particularly targeted towards assisting homeless people. And so again, we invest all of these dollars in housing and community development, and in total, they're close to $14.5 million. So our process today is we started back in the fall of 2018. We are reviewing the priorities this month with both you and our Housing and Community Development Commission. On April 2nd, we'll begin our 30-day public review period, and then we'll be submitting the plan on May 15th of 2020. So we do have 2 visits to the City Council as well, where we're going to be holding public meetings. So the new priorities or goals for this 5-year plan are: we want to increase housing and self-sufficiency opportunities for homeless populations and the prevention of homelessness for at-risk individuals and families. We want to create new affordable housing opportunities and preserve existing affordable housing. 3, we want to promote fair housing and lower barriers to housing. And then 4th, we want to strengthen and stabilize communities' conditions and help to improve residents' ability to increase their employment prospects and grow their assets. So what we tried to do with this 5-year plan was to align it with the priorities that the City Council has identified over the past year. We have been engaged in extensive outreach and engagement. We took to heart the comments that you gave us to try to go to as many different events versus just offering events that people came to us at City Hall. So we did that by having 21 focus groups and small stakeholder meetings. We tried to do pop-up tables at community events to get some people engaged. Along with the county, because we did do this 5-year plan in coordination with the county, we had an online regional survey, and that also included some of the smaller cities. And then lastly, we had some feedback. Again, we did the feedback from all of our recent efforts. So we have been doing extensive community outreach in the anti-displacement plan and also in our community outreach that we've been doing on the new community plan to end homeless. So we actually brought those community comments into this document as well and use that to inform our new priorities. So in terms of the first priority, which is to increase housing opportunities for homeless populations, what you find here are a list of different programs that we're proposing we could fund under the plan. So it includes homeless citywide and downtown outreach, prevention programs, data system support, TBRA, and emergency shelter or interim housing. In the homeless plan and for this document, we are prioritizing some targeted populations, and that includes homeless families and youth. It also includes individuals, because in the homeless population we know there's many individuals that have concerns as well. The second opportunity for housing is we want to create new affordable housing opportunities and preserve existing affordable housing. And so different programs that we can fund under this objective or goal is, of course, affordable housing, but more importantly, land acquisition, and we can do some infrastructure. We want to continue our single-family and mobile home repair programs. We want to continue to support the City of San Jose's enhanced and targeted code enforcement. We are looking at supporting a soft-story apartment retrofit program. And then in our anti-displacement plan, we want to support community-based housing development entities, because one of the work items there is if we can purchase smaller buildings. Many cities have CDCs, which are community-based development corporations that really focus in specific neighborhoods. In fact, they rarely go outside their boundary. And what makes them special is they become part of the fabric of a community and neighborhood. And so they're really looking for the interests of those neighborhoods, and when they redevelop in those neighborhoods, they're redeveloping in a way that's addressing the specific needs of those neighborhoods. And we don't have any of those in San Jose. We have 2 wonderful nonprofits that already exist here, and we have one for-profit that exists here, but none of them are neighborhood-based. They'll go wherever they're needed in the city, and so they don't really have the time and the ability to really get to know a neighborhood and understand its needs. So we're hoping to incubate somebody that would be willing to do that work here in San Jose. We want to promote fair housing and lower the barriers to housing. Under the anti-displacement work that we're doing, we have learned that there are many different communities, whether it's undocumented people, recent immigrants, families with children who have told us that they are experiencing discrimination or having challenges finding housing in our community. And so we realize we need to create a broader work plan to address this issue. And so we're going to be providing funding in order to address those issues through this 5-year plan. And then our typical fair housing education with legal assistance. The next goal is we want to strengthen and stabilize communities' conditions and help to improve residents' ability to increase their employment. So the other side of housing, I always say, is employment. If we can get people better paying jobs, and they can do better either through education or through their jobs, then they don't need, well, they still may need, but perhaps they don't need the lowest cost housing in San Jose. And so we are looking at doing more work in job training and employment development than we've done before in the past. We want to continue to build the infrastructure so that low-income neighborhoods and people who live in low-income neighborhoods can get the skills they need to be organized and to bring resources to their communities. We are supporting broadband infrastructure in low-income neighborhoods to ensure that our low-income neighborhoods can receive the technology that they need in order to, again, improve their education. We're committed to look at childcare facilities and see if we can find opportunities to fund childcare facilities, and then ADA and other rehab and tenant improvements to support nonprofits that are struggling in our communities who are serving low-income families and children. So our next steps is we have a meeting on tonight with the Housing Commission and the public to go over these objectives. And then our first public hearing with the City Council is April 7th. We will come back on April 9th to HCDC. And then we have another City Council meeting on the 5th. We submit the plan May 15th. And with that, we are open for questions.
Wonderful, thank you so much, Jackie. I'm going to look to my colleagues. Oh, and we have public comment from Serena Alvarez. Come to the mic, and I believe, Michelle, if you weren't here at the beginning of the meeting.
Please
we've
don't
a-
touch the
we've-
microphone.
I was just about to say, don't touch the microphone, but if it's too far, I don't know, maybe Ruth, you could do that at this point. And I have antibacterial.
We have wipes right
I do
here.
too.
We have wipes, yes. We're prepared. We're prepared.
Thank you to the committee for hearing this item today. I want to express appreciation to staff for their work. I appreciate that families, my name is Serena Alvarez. I'm the district director for LULAC District 14. I'm a member of the LULAC State Board. I am the executive director of the Institute for Nonviolence and a member of the core team for Latinos in Action 2020. I'm here with all of those hats on, and with a reminder of the LULAC state resolution that asked that the city of San Jose put McKinney-Vento families as a priority. I appreciate hearing families, the term families used in the plan, but I did not, every time I look at any document, to the director particularly, and to Angel Rios if he's anywhere listening, I word searched before I open anything else. I word search as McKinney-Vento in this document, and I have yet to find a city document that will have McKinney-Vento referenced in it. And I'll tell you why, because you're reporting to a federal agency. Why are we not using federally mandated liaisons that are in our school districts, who meet quarterly, who are the first hands that these schools have in front of these homeless families? Why be reinventing the wheel? I appreciate that we have small tent meetings. I appreciate that you're making yourself present in the community, but we have elected officials in several districts. The East Side Alliance sits with 7 district, with superintendents of all those districts, 8 districts in East San Jose. They meet quarterly. You could sit in front of them, and those school district trustees will appreciate being heard. They are frustrated that they're not contacted. So, and not only that, you have the Santa Clara County Office of Education. They're having on Monday a meeting of a task force. Are you participating in that? McKinney-Vento leaders, Joanne Vars and Itzika de la Cruz. You have Darius Brown in-house, who's the former County Office of Education, McKinney-Vento coordinator for the County Office of Education. So I'm wondering, my job as a facilitator professionally at the Institute for Nonviolence is to connect dots, and I'm here to help you do that. So I'm going to give you a copy of this, and McKinney-Vento ought to be, today I'm informal, I don't really want to have to suit up to come and remind you. McKinney-Vento needs to be in these documents.
Thank you. If anybody else is interested in public comment, please come up to the mic, and then you can fill out a yellow card. Which it doesn't look like anybody else is going to. So I'm going to go to my colleague, Councilmember Esparza.
Thank you. So I wanted to go back to the slide with the create new affordable housing opportunities and preserve existing affordable housing. Under one of the items I wanted to ask more about is enhanced and targeted code enforcement. Does this include expanding what we're doing now, or keeping it at the level that we're doing it now?
So we're still in conversations with the code department, planning and code, PBCE. They're the ones that actually select the priorities, and so we haven't received from them what the priorities are. We have funding to expand, and so if there are particular sites that you're interested in, you should let us know. So what has to happen, we can't pay for regular code. So when we talk about enhanced code enforcement, the federal government has a very specific definition of what that means. And what that means is we have to be coordinated with some other initiative that the city's implementing as well. Because the federal government sees the regular day-to-day activity of code enforcement as a responsibility of the local jurisdiction. So what we've tried to do is coordinate enhanced code enforcement with some of the specialized activities where they, PRNS and the police department were doing particular efforts to work in neighborhoods around particular high crime areas.
So would it be fair to say that this would be like Mayor's Gang Task Force hotspots or Project Hope locations?
Correct, yes, something like that.
Okay. We've gone over some of this before, but the reason I wanted to pull this out is Tuesday night, we had an item come before us that was specific to Valley Palms. But I think had we opened it up to other sister properties at Foxdale, at Lexington, at the Regency, at Casa Real, at Villa Monterey, and La Fontaine, I think we would have found similar conditions to the horrifying photos that were shown. And I think the tragedy out of that is that residents are afraid to report some of those horrific conditions to the authorities because they feel like as horrific as they were, that their alternative is to be out on the street. And so in order to literally preserve existing housing, we really need to be hyper-focused on properties like that, because frankly, it should not have been allowed to continue as long as it did, right? And so if we could coordinate, so housing is working on some of those efforts, and then we have the gang task force, and some of these sites are Project Hopes. Some of the sites, not all of those sites are Project Hope, but they are all gang force hotspots. We do have special initiatives for sites, such as the sister properties. And if housing could do kind of an analysis of those similar properties, because there's an absolute correlation between the crime and the poverty and the blatant disregard for providing safe living conditions for residents in some of these locations. And so I just ask that those sites be included.
Right, and I think what the argument we would be able to make on some of these that we haven't, because is that the county has their own programs in particular areas, and I don't know if we're recognizing those county programs as part of our specialized effort, which I think would help us in terms of our ability to use this funding for code enforcement. Okay. So we'll definitely look that up, and we'll coordinate with the county to find out if they have similar programs that they have like in Valley Palms, where we could then substantiate the need for it.
All right, thank you.
Can I do a follow-up question to that? I hate to interrupt you. Thanks. But what happens with some of the severe conditions that our families are replicating for themselves because there isn't enough apartments, but they're, there's doubling or tripling up in a single detached family home? Would those communities also be able to fall into this, even though they're not apartments, but there are these severe code enforcement violations?
So for in terms of code enforcement, unless again, there's some specialized programs that, that either the city or the county were operating that we could connect ourselves to on the code side, we wouldn't be able to provide enhanced code enforcement. So just by the fact, so the full report has a complete analysis on overcrowding. Is that correct? Yes, so we looked at overcrowding, and you'll see that, I think there's a map too in on the map. Is there a map on? No? No, okay, but there's data on overcrowding when you actually see the full report, so that we did take overcrowding into account. But if you're talking about code enforcement, there has to be, the city or the county, I think we could make an argument there that we're working together to address some condition in a neighborhood. That's what allows us to do this enhanced code enforcement. Otherwise, the federal government's position is it's the city's responsibility.
Right. It's our basic service to our residents. Yes, and in the, particular in the community that I'm thinking about is Welch. So we do have a Project Hope in that area, but we can talk offline
Sure.
about this. I just thought it was interesting that you
no.
brought that up, Councilmember.
And in the Seven Trees, there's also, if we're going to look at the county, there's also Operation Redwood through the DA's office and the DA's special program for community prosecutors that offer another sort of layer of specialized services. And I actually I have a map from the 2010 census on overcrowding, and I think it would be really helpful if when this came up to the City Council on April 7th or May 5th, to include a map of overcrowding, because it's pretty stark when you look at it. I mean, it's predictable. And again, if we look at overcrowding, poverty, crime, violence, all of these things are happening in parts of the city that I don't think we need to do extensive research on, because I think we do know
Yeah.
where they are, and they're communities that need support. And if we kind of take our foot off the pedal, you know, things get out of hand. And so we have to just recognize the fact that in some parts of the community, they do need specialized care. And so those services are already there, so it would be great if we, in one form or another, if we could just provide this enhanced code so that, again, we as a city can let some of these property owners know that this is not something that San Jose is okay with.
Right.
Thank you.
Is that here? Do you have any questions? Okay, wonderful. So I'm going to ask some of my questions. And this is a really good point that you brought up, Councilmember. So I saw the list of folks that on attachment A, and I just want to say that it's wonderful to see a variety of groups here. And I think to the speaker who is here, and to her point, I don't see on the list Santa Clara County Office of Education, although you did meet at plenty of schools' sites. But I do think that there is, we need to acknowledge that point. And I think your housing staff, Jackie, has been doing some work around children and families, and I know that there was two kind of competing definitions in terms of what the McKinney-Vento folks consider inadequate housing, which is couch surfing, right? And then what we define as unhoused, right?
Right.
Can you tell me where you all arrived in that definition? How has it changed?
Sure. So I think the question comes when we're doing the homeless count and when we release the numbers of how many homeless families we have. And strangely, both of those definitions are pushed out by HUD. So the definition of homeless that we use for the homeless count comes from HUD, and the definition that they're using in McKinney-Vento comes from HUD. They just don't match. So for the homeless count, you know,
That is
we're
interesting.
bound by HUD to submit based on how they're providing us direction, and so that's what we do. And so I think the question is, and it's a good one, when we come back with a community plan to end homelessness, what's the definition we're using there? Because, we can create whatever definition we want. And so that's some feedback that I will bring back because we are planning to come to council soon on that item. And so I'll just want to make sure that, I think it's a good question of how broadly we're defining it. And I think for the community plan, which is how we implement our program, we're going to define it more broadly.
Oh, great, great. Well, I'm glad to hear, and I know the community plan to end homelessness is coming to an end as well, correct? So you're going to reinitiate that plan?
Correct. We are creating a new 5-year plan, and you're going to have a preview of that plan in April, I believe.
We have the purview of a preview
Preview.
by me and NSC members, okay.
There's a tentative council date set, but with the COVID-19
Sure.
situation, the team is moving forward, though.
Yes, the team is moving forward with an opportunity for you to see the plan before it gets finalized.
Okay. So the reason I bring that up is I wanted to know how those definitions influenced the way that you conducted outreach, and if it meant only staying within, the one side of HUD or the other side of HUD. I don't know if it influenced any of that outreach at all.
It doesn't. In
Okay.
terms of for this plan, it doesn't. There could be definitional pieces. Using federal funding is always challenging because how they define it is how we have to use the funding. And so for programs like ESG and HOPWA, they have very
Right.
strict definitions about what it means to be homeless. And they could be more narrow than what the McKinney-Vento definition is. We get audited and monitored all the time on those. So what I need to check is that, as I stated earlier, we also used public outreach that we received in the homeless plan, in the development of the homeless plan. And I would assume we would have reached out to McKinney-Vento as part of that effort because that was very extensive. And, that's a community plan, so we wanted to reach out to everyone.
So is one of the, I know that.
But I'll confirm and get back to you on whether that group was contacted for that effort.
Thank you. So I know that you listed the groups that you met with, and I saw in the report, obviously, the results in these 4 areas are the result of conducting those surveys and those focus groups and gathering that information, synthesizing it, having these 4 areas represent that feedback. I wanted to, I don't know if you have this information, but I wanted to know what some of the groups that involved parents, if they had any of that feedback about families. Did children and families rise to the top in any of these groups? How did you determine that you were going to prioritize youth and young adults and children and families?
So that did come out as a priority when we were working on the community plan to end homelessness, that family and youth needed to be a priority in the plan, that we needed to create specific programs that reached out to families and youth. In the affordable housing piece, we also realized that we need to put more attention on families because in the past few years, we've invested a lot of money on permanent supportive housing, and that's provided a lot of 1-bedrooms and smaller efficiencies. And clearly, those aren't suitable for families. And so we need to start investing more in some family housing again. So part of it is the outreach, part of it is looking at, the information that we're, just the data we're collecting on the work that we're doing. We've also working with the Housing Authority, and they also have told us that they need to shift some of their investment back into families because they've invested so much on the permanent supportive housing. So we've heard that feedback, and then I'll turn to staff to see if they have any additional feedback that they heard during their outreach.
Hi, Shirley Victorio with the Housing Department Grants Manager. I did attend one of the focus groups that was held at the the Eastside Union High School District, and there were some families in attendance, and one of them was spot on, exactly what you said, Jackie. They wanted more investments in family housing, mostly homes rather than apartment complexes and condominiums, just in an effort so that they could build their wealth and build their assets here in Santa Clara County. And we had at least, I want to say, 10 attendees mention the same things.
Great, thank you.
And let me just turn to the consultant to see if she can recall any of that public outreach and summaries, if there were specific comments from families.
I attended the meetings in the city of San Jose. There were 4 meetings. There were no families specifically at the meetings. Most of the focus was primarily on fair housing assistance, but a lot of the data does show that the neediest families are small family households that experience the very low incomes, extremely low, and very low and low. So that's there in the data, but as far as the outreach, there's a strong need for daycare and programs for youth, at-risk youth. That's a priority need that comes up a lot in the public outreach. And yes, so those are the main ones.
Great, thank you. Last week I got an advocate in the office, and, you know, they're a part of a larger organization. And, you know, she is spending her free time advocating for housing when she herself lives with 3 other families in an apartment. Not a single detached family home, you know, where you have possibly the luxury of more square footage, but in an actual apartment, right? And I don't think that's very uncommon. I think that's more common than not. But if we're not asking these populations these questions, then we're going to receive the traditional feedback that we normally do. And I think that's the point from the McKinney-Vento folks and their perspective. And I'm glad to hear that maybe some of that information, some of that feedback is trickling in from the county 5-year plan. I just wonder if there's any opportunity we can maybe fold in some of the advocates for McKinney-Vento or within our community that can speak to family needs. And before I go any further, I did get another request for public comment. This was from Karen Gillette. Would you come to the mic? And we did ask not to touch the microphone.
Okay,
But if you need it adjusted, Ruth is open to adjusting it.
I'll try.
Okay.
The way it is and not touch it.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, my name is Karen Gillette. I'm a homeless advocate. I think many of you know me. I'd just like to speak. This morning I was reading the Mercury News, and I saw that you all are thinking about suspending the evictions that have to do related to the virus, scare. I would like to propose that when we think about housing and we think about people, especially families with young children being unhoused, if we could suspend evictions from homes and apartments for people, not just because of the virus, but because we need to stop this flow into the experience of homelessness. And it keeps happening time and again here in our city and our county. It just keeps happening. And we really need to stop that flow out into homelessness, as I say, especially for the families with children. So I would just really ask you to consider that when you're planning for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Wonderful. So is there an opportunity for folks who represent children and families or the McKinney-Vento folks? I think you said there was a 30-day community review
Yes, there is.
So during that time, they could come in if they wanted to, or is there a more appropriate time for them to?
Well, again, I don't want you to think that we did not speak to any families, number one, because we did have, based on your feedback, because we had the traditional 4 meetings that we had to
Right.
have. And as you hear, we didn't get a very diverse group of people, and that's why the staff expanded the outreach, was to ensure that we're hearing broader voices. So we haven't even started the public comment period. So the challenge now is with COVID. If we were in any normal time, I would say we would try to get something set up sooner versus later, because we're going to publish the report. So we will try our best to get something sooner versus later before, if possible. Ideally, I'd want to do it before I publish the report. If not, we will definitely get something.
Yes,
done.
and I don't doubt that there's plenty of families that have come in. Like, you went to the K. Smith Elementary School. That's a PTA meeting. There's absolutely families of young children, elementary school age children for sure. And I think the intention is really to hear the need for this population without maybe asking some of these families directly. I think it's difficult to say, hey, I'm living with 3 other families in an apartment.
Sure.
It might not be something that you want to share out loud. You might say, well, we need more housing. But the underlying reason is your situation, your family living situation. And so I think it's not because I don't think that you did, I think you did a fabulous job here. You have 308 attendees in total, and then surveys 648. So I think there's definitely an effort. I know that you heard us loud and clear. You went out and collected this information. I just think, as we're reflecting from public comment and just hearing from folks directly, I don't know that families would maybe say this out loud. This advocate, said it to me in a very private setting, but I don't know if she would have done that in a public meeting. And so I think going to some of these folks who represent the families might release them from that kind of situation, and then they would be more free to actually speak to some of those situations and the needs. But
I would say during our anti-displacement work, we heard a lot from people around overcrowding. Frankly, that was a huge concern. And there are people's attempts to stay. They move into places where they get overcrowded, but it still doesn't work out, right?
Yeah.
And then they're forced to leave. So,
Yeah.
but we're happy to see if we can set something up.
Wonderful.
The only cautionary thing I'm going to put is the COVID has made it very challenging to do things.
Absolutely.
But we'll
Yeah.
definitely try.
Yeah, I think if we stick to some of the advocates, they might be able to give you some feedback electronically and not have to
And
have
we
any
can
kind
do
of
it as a
meeting.
phone call.
Yeah, or a phone call. What? We can use a phone? Wait, you? Yes. Go ahead, Councilmember.
Okay. I actually wanted to follow up on those comments that, so for example, seeing 7 trees, often the city has in the past tried to combine to a neighborhood association, which is very small in that area, and often even of the members in that neighborhood association don't live in the neighborhood, frankly. And so what District 7 has been doing is we have been, in an effort to support the neighborhood association and grow it, we've been going door to door in the neighborhood in order to get more community impact and involvement, and combine different city meetings so that people aren't having to go to 20 different meetings about 20 different things. So in the future, I would ask that the housing department work with us to do things like that, because frankly, when we just kind of tack on out of convenience, we're missing the voice of the average resident. And I wanted to add one more thing to Councilmember Arenas' comments, which is something that every school district in San Jose is seeing, which is declining enrollment because of the fact that families are having to leave the area due to the cost of living and housing. And so that's something every school district is grappling with at some level or another. And so I think, to Councilmember Arenas' point, is a phone call or getting some kind of input from the school districts, whether it's McKinney-Vento, I mean, definitely with McKinney-Vento, but also to see if there's sort of some other form of input that the school districts can provide, because I can tell you, I have a middle school in a very low-income neighborhood in my district that I believe 3 years ago was 900 students, and in this current student year, it's half of what it was 3 years ago. And it's not charter schools, it's none of that. It's the fact that families are leaving and going to the Central Valley and other places that are more affordable. And before they go to that drastic step and leave, they are living in substandard living conditions, whether it's overcrowding or horrible apartments like what we saw Tuesday night. They're putting up with that until they just can't anymore for whatever reason, and then they're leaving. So I think the school districts are a great resource for data and how families with children, school-aged children, are being impacted by the housing crisis. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Last, before we end this item, I do want to say that I appreciate that you've added the strategies, the 3 strategies to complete the work. And one of them is addressing the root causes of homelessness through the system and policy change. And I heard you earlier talking about more of the workforce development, which is, when we say there's a housing crisis, it really isn't true. What it really comes down to, some of those underlying reasons, is that there's income inequality, and then there's just high cost of living in this Bay Area that just doesn't seem to catch up with workers. So I appreciate that. I really appreciate that. And I'm really excited to see what that would look like for the workforce development. And would you be working together with any of the programs that the library already has on workforce development? Is there any partnership that you typically have with each other? Or is this because this is kind of a new area that you haven't thought about connecting with the library?
So we haven't thought about the library. The one area, there are 2 areas we were thinking of expanding. So we right now have a small program for homeless people to get some employment there. And so we're going to continue to provide support in that particular area because, again, if we can get people into jobs, then we can increase our opportunity. And we have been speaking with Jeff Ruster from OED regarding employment opportunities and how we might be able to use CDBG. But we can definitely check to understand what employment programs the library is doing.
Wonderful. Thank you. I appreciate that. So your next step, if you can help me understand the process, you have this initial feedback from the community. You've developed the priorities and some of the strategies that you're going to use to address address these priorities. What is the next step? Because I did hear you say on April 2nd there's a 30-day community review. So you have that 30-day community review, then you submit the actual report.
Right. So what we're going to do now is we're having a meeting today with you all, and then we're having a meeting with HCDC. We're going to further refine our the 4 goals. Again, we might try to set up some calls between now and then we're going to publish a report that's going to say, here's what we're proposing now as our final 4 or 5 goals and the types of programs we're going to fund, and we'll get more community input. Mm-hmm. We get that 30-day review, and then we'll have 2 visits to council. So the first visit is when you'll hear our full presentation on, after hearing your comments today, hearing HCD and public comment tonight. Here's the final plan that we're proposing. We have 30 days to hear people's additional comments. We can make more changes after that. We'll then present our final best product to you when we come back, and that's what we'll submit unless you direct us to make any changes.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. What I would love to see is, and I'm sure that this is part of your next step in your report. This is, I get that this is a more general update. But I'd love to see the feedback that you received from the community, how that has shaped some of the programs and services that we are going to fund as a result of.
Okay.
Because I do want to see the nexus from the feedback and our response in form of strategy. Did you have a question, Councilmember? Okay. All right. Do we have a motion?
Move to approve.
All in favor? Are those opposed? All right, so that moves forward. Thanks so much, Jackie. Good luck tonight, and we look forward to having you come back. Okay, so next we are going to hear the report on early education and an update on council priority number 14, child care and early education. Our audience will, please, we're just, for those folks at home who may not be watching what we're doing, we're just cleaning some of the surface areas to make sure that we comply with sanitizing areas for new folks who are going to present. So welcome, Jill.
So good afternoon, members of the committee. I'm Jill Bourne, City Librarian, and I'll be reporting today on 4 items related to early education within the Education Digital Literacy Strategy. Let me get this up. There we go. Although I'm up here solo, just for the sake of time, it should be known that I'm actually representing dozens of staff who are deeply engaged in advancing this work, and I want to acknowledge key staff who are here and who will join me if you have any questions, because they're the experts. And so we have Laura Buzo from PRNS, who's the early ed lead for PRNS. Also, I saw Andrea Flores-Shelton come in. She may have stepped out, but I hope she'll come back from PRNS. Araceli Delgado-Ortiz is the early ed lead for the library. And Vidya Kalambi is the division manager over the education work. Deborah Lee Olazaba is our newest member, who's a literacy specialist who's overseeing the workforce development program that you will learn about. We also have Michelle McGurk from the city manager's office has been working with us on this. John Cicerelli, who couldn't be here, and a couple of others, Neil Rufino. I want to thank Rosalind Huey and Jared Hart from PBCE, Matt Kano, Walter Lynn from Public Works, Chris Burton, Elizabeth Handler from OED, and also from the library, Michelle Ornott, Jenny Choi, and Lisa Valerio. And I could probably go on. It truly takes an enormous village to do this work. So while there is voluminous research on why early care and education experiences are so important in the lives of our children, here are just a few reasons for making this work a priority in San Jose. Notably, in Santa Clara County, only about half of incoming kindergartners are currently ready to succeed in school, according to a recent study by the Santa Clara County Office of Education. And only a third of low-income children have access to quality care and early education experiences before kindergarten. The map here is also in your packet as attachment A. Visualizes the delta between the current supply and demand for early care settings and preschool by zip code. The more intense the color, the more intense the unmet demand. I did that thing I'm not supposed to do. Okay, the 4 programs being covered here today are all intended to improve access to quality childcare and early education opportunities for all children who need them. First up, a mid-year report on the early education quality standards, which were approved by this committee and City Council in March of 2019. As a reminder, the quality standards are comprised of 8 program quality standard areas and 4 levels of the continuum of quality, from basic quality not met, which would indicate that a program needs to change immediately, to advanced quality, which is our goal. In the first phase, the library and PRNS set about adapting the standards and assessments for 2 programs with widest reach, serving almost 30,000 children annually: Library Storytimes and the Recreational Preschool. In phase 2, we would then adapt the standards for all programs with adjustments based on what we have learned. So starting in July of 2019, the library adapted the quality standards to a Storytime framework, resulting in the SJPL Storytime Standards and Curriculum, which incorporates the California Preschool Learning Framework, evidence-based research, and best practices. So by observing more than 50 Storytime programs, staff completed a baseline quality assessment, provided staff with feedback, training, and other resources. Staff also engaged more than 600 care providers regarding Storytime program satisfaction, and developed quality improvement plans by location, which will be measured and reported regularly. Oh, did I go ahead? Sorry, I skipped one, I think. For the recreational preschool program, similarly, the PRNS staff was able to complete assessments for 25 classrooms, and also quality improvement plans for those 25 classrooms, and then tracking the quality improvement plans for progress in spring of this year. For expanding the program, at the 7 non-pilot sites, programming remained consistent with previous years, but the department is exploring ongoing partnership with First 5 of Santa Clara County to consider expansion to all recreational preschool sites. I think a big concern or something consideration in this area is the level of resources needed to transition a program of this scale to quality. And so implementation requires capacity building for staff and partners, and you'll see they've been very busy doing that. Also, assessment activities require intensive staff time and training, and PRNS intends to address operational challenges and needs as we go forward in future budget years. So here's the staff training and development, which is obviously a huge focus of early learning quality services. So far, you see in this chart, library staff training totals about 1,400 hours, 1,451 for the year, and PRNS totals 1,440 for training associated with the pilot phase, and another 600 hours for staff from sites that are not in the pilot. So a total of over 2,000 hours dedicated to early education quality training. So following the first full year of implementation, which will be this summer, the department's plan to conduct a formal assessment of program quality, then analyze that data and report back to this committee in the fall of 2020. Okay, moving on. Next, we have a status report on the new City Council priority regarding childcare and early education, specifically preschool facilities. The stated goals for this priority were to increase 1,000 childcare slots each year, to increase facilities suitable for childcare, to improve access and affordability, and improve kindergarten readiness. It's a very broad goal with several approaches. First stated goals for the priority was to, the first action for the priority was to pursue and prioritize new policies or policy modifications to incentivize new childcare facilities. And so in this, we've identified 2 policies that are relevant. One was the policy on the San Jose Education Initiative, which was revised on February 11th, 2020. And then in addition, policy 614, guidelines for childcare, has been identified and prioritized for revision by the city manager's office. So those both would be coming back to this committee. The next group of actions involves evaluating potential opportunities to add physical childcare spaces for full-day licensed childcare, which is a great need, but also takes the longest and is the most costly. First, partnering with Public Works, we have 13 PRNS facilities that are being evaluated for possible adding on. followed by 10 library facilities, followed by potential school site spaces, working closely with Santa Clara County Office of Education. All of these assessments will be done in the spring, so we should have a good understanding of the cost and timeline for adding physical childcare in the city. In the area of encouraging childcare sites and new developments, we looked at mixed-use affordable housing with the Housing Department. Oh, I forgot to thank them. The Housing Department is very helpful. They have created for their the 2020 Notice of Funding Availability, an entire chapter on childcare, allowing for points for developers who choose to add childcare to a mixed-use development or to affordable housing. Secondly, ground floor or retail at new mixed-use developments. The Office of Economic Development is exploring targeted incentives, including ideas for storefront assistance grants, reimbursement of permitting costs, tenant improvements, et cetera. So other policy ideas that can come forward. Recently, legislation nullified our Urban Village Amenity Credit Program, and a new mixed-use zoning district considerations from the Department of Planning, Building, Code Enforcement could encourage early childhood education specifications in any new mixed-use building or mixed-use buildings that want Urban Village Amenity Credits type of points. And then lastly, we were asked to consider the private recreation credit that goes towards development of parks when new housing goes in place. And this use was actually found to not be consistent with the state law. And then 2 other directives from the policy are to improve materials that assist potential providers. So the library and the Office of Economic Development are developing improved marketing, web presence, and other tools and outreach to potential child care provider network. Secondly, to create process improvements for permitting new child care facilities. And the Department of Planning, Building, Code Enforcement has recommended revising requirements for licensed child care to a special use permit, which would then streamline the process and reduce applicant costs significantly. Okay, next. We have the workforce training program. So as the committee knows, 2 main challenges driving the deficit in childcare services in San Jose include insufficient facilities and shortages in a trained workforce. So we are attempting to address the facility issue, and then this program attempts to address the shortage in trained workforce. In 2019, the March budget message directed and allocated funding for the library to evaluate, design, and launch a child care provider training program. So our approach was that our early education services conducted a professional development environmental scan throughout the county, surveying caregivers themselves. 277 informal caregivers were surveyed at both Storytimes and Family Resource Centers. They also received community input from 12 stakeholder organizations and identified existing programs by visiting and researching 6 programs that are currently run by informal caregivers, or training programs for informal caregivers. I think I need some water, excuse me. Okay, so this is just a survey to show the different programs that we worked with to get information from and about, so that we can understand the landscape and not duplicate work that's already out there. And then from the stakeholder data that was collected, what we learned was that the most important factors in a program of this sort would be to remove barriers, to increase networking and social connections for the participants, and also that there are so many different types of caregivers in the informal caregiver space that one size would not fit all. So there has to be an approach that is flexible for different folks and who have different reasons for doing the work that they're doing. Also that, as we showed on the previous slide, there are many current systems for supporting informal caregivers as well as formal caregivers, and lots of folks working in the space. So really integrating existing systems rather than creating a whole new one. Really defining the city's role and understanding what What the surveys showed with the city is really seen as a trusted convener and someone or some organization that can provide support and really make the systems all work together. And then also identified supports that the caregivers need are social and emotional, professional development, and additional resources. And then lastly, the fact that our informal caregivers are a diverse group, there's no single workforce development pathway that fits the needs of all, and the approach will be multi-level, provide support, and eliminate barriers. So this is a very complicated chart that shows a really a strategic approach in 3 phases to creating an 18-month informal caregiver program for training that allows folks to follow pathways either just from improving their skills and their level of quality in their informal caregiving, or it also allows them to pursue more formal caregiver training, certifications, and being able to go into other types of employment around caregiving if they choose. So if you have questions about this, we have our experts are here to answer those. So that's the end of that section. And then moving on to the Family Friendly Initiative. In this area, we looked at, we did a needs assessment for city facilities to be able to add amenities for families, specifically changing tables and private lactation amenities. So we looked at facility size and space availability. We looked at community data to understand the need and potential use, and then developed a data rubric in partnership with PRNS to look at our both city library and PRNS facilities. Some of the data included, to understand the community need, we looked at the income below poverty level, medium household income. We also looked at areas where there could be high usage of a service. So we looked at population within census tracts and the density. We looked at neighboring census tracts, the female population, and also the population of young children. So the children and women who might actually use some of these services. And then also looked at location serving populations of potential users. So again, program attendance at locations for 0 to 5, so where the kids already are. And the 10 locations that we've identified so far that met both the space requirements and the data rubric are listed here. Note at the bottom, we have 5 libraries, 4 community centers, because PRNS has been working really hard to find a 5th site that is that can fit the space requirements, essentially. So we've gone through a couple already. We're still looking, and we're open to exploring other types of sites. And then lastly, we're working with Public Works to assess all identified locations, to complete any site preparations and related tasks, and to install branded wraparound to the exterior so that when people use them, they know that it's a city provided space for them. And that's that. That's the end of my report. We welcome any questions that you have. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jill. And I'm going to ask Karen Gillette to come to the mic.
Hello. You know me as a homeless advocate, but for my career, I was an academic librarian. I worked for almost 30 years at Foothill College. And during those times, we had a child care center on campus. So I did some story time for our children that came up from our child care center that was at our lower campus area. I think certainly we know that reading is essential for young children. I think the one thing that Jill did not mention, I know that at Martin Luther King Library we do have an adult literacy program. Obviously, it's really important, and I'd like to see a little more of a focus. You didn't mention focusing in on adult literacy, because if the parents can't read to their children, I think, yes, the story times are important within the libraries, but I think it's crucial for the parents to be able to read to their children. The other thing is, even though we used to have a child care center at Foothill, we don't any longer. It's moved to De Anza College, and I know that they do a lot of training there. of caregivers, that sort of experience there. So I hope that you'll be working with some community colleges in the area on developing program, because I would think that it could, whatever program you develop for the libraries could feed right easily into the community college program. So thank you very much.
And I'm going to, before I ask my colleagues for their questions, Jill, do you have an answer to that question or that point that Karen just brought up? Because I'm sure that you're working with First Five, and I know First Five works with West Valley, and they have a program already established, especially to move home-based childcare providers into a system where they can attain bachelor's and maybe even more, and increase their capacity and their income. Do you have an answer in terms of what Karen had just suggested? Are you working with other?
About joining the parent and child literacy programs?
That was her first point, where her last point being, are you connected with any colleges?
Yeah, I would ask Araceli, who's a lead on this project, to answer that question. She's
Great. And Araceli, I just mentioned that you all are working with First Five, and I know that First Five has already a program set up with West Valley, but I don't know if you're working with any other colleges directly, or you're allowing for that work to happen through folks who are already in this area.
So if we can go back to the slide of all the different models.
fancy rubric.
The fancy rubric. We are actually in talks with Mission College for the academic units. So in phase one of our project, we actually have 6 units that the participants will complete. The reason we've chosen Mission College is because the target population that we're hoping to reach are bilingual. So Spanish-speaking classes or bilingual classes are essential for us. So Mission College is the only community college in the area that is able to do that. So we are hooked up with Mission College.
Oh, wow. Well, that is really great to know, and really sad to know that our local San Jose colleges don't have.
Bilingual courses.
Yes, that
At
is.
this time, I think they might be looking into it, but Mission College is the only actually community college in the area right now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, it's wonderful that you found a facility. Hopefully, you'll give us a different kind of update later on.
We're hoping so.
Yeah. All right, and let me go to my colleagues and see. Councilmember Jimenez, you have any questions? No. Okay, then it's all me. It's all me. All right, so I'm gonna go to the. Actually, if we stay at this chart, and this is something we discussed, Jill, and I still have this question about in this flow chart. I don't know that our typical caregiver is really represented here, because you have a targeted community outreach, foundational programming, and then, which is part of phase one, intake and assessment. And phase two is either you're gonna start a family childcare, or you're gonna enter the early education workforce as a professional pathway. So where would, like, grandma, where would she fit into this? Because I think the idea is that we connect with as many caregivers as we can to raise their quality of standards by providing them with some information about early developmental milestones and how to interact.
Definitely. So we have, at the library, we have a few different approaches, and I think Jill mentioned that it's not a one-size-fit-all. So for instance, this year, we started with our We Connect program with the library, and that's a 6-week series for informal caregivers. So that really addresses the needs of the grandparents, the lady next door who might be watching her child, and 2 other children, or whatever it may be. So for us, this is one particular program. There's a little bit of a softer touch that we're looking for grandparents and that particular target community. The other thing that we are considering adding to this potential pilot is a third strand. So we have the starting of family childcare, then we'll have the entering the educational workforce. But we're looking at possibly an alternative setting. And that alternative setting might hit the population that you're talking about, people who might be not so much looking for a license, but are caring for children, and we want to make sure that they're able to provide quality early learning experiences. So I think that third box would fit the need of what you're looking for. That would also fit the Family Resource Center staff that, might not go into a licensed childcare, but they also
Right.
are providing that access to children, that,
Right.
that touch for kids. So we're thinking that third box might be something we really want to look into a little bit more.
I'm really glad to hear that, Araceli, because the fact is that a lot of our lower income families can't afford licensed childcare. It just, it's about $2,000 a month, and this is just preschool, right? This is not even like
If
the
you're
actual
lucky,
childcare part this is just preschool, right? So I know that sometimes these informal ways of caring for our children are probably just as important as a licensed childcare environment. And so I would love to see that third strand there so that we can really formalize. And I think you are already doing that through the We Connect program. I know that First Five has their FFN programming that they're encouraging take place at family resource centers. We're hoping to host them at our Welch Community Center. We're also really open to seeing if you want to also provide the We Connect at our center. That would be just absolutely fabulous. So love to see that third rail to see how your typical caregiver would feed into this. And I know that you're already doing the work. Just love to see that formalized a little bit more.
And Councilmember, in attachment D, I hadn't pointed out earlier that it actually does break down the programming by the three.
Yes, I saw that. Yeah.
Right, and so I think the programming examples for the foundational
Mhm.
are all more of the informal, they're appropriate for grandparents or family members
Right.
who don't intend to pursue a career in childcare.
Mhm.
But the great thing is, from those conversations, from those sessions that we've had, we now have a growing list of people who are interested in a more formalized process like this one.
Right.
So I think, like I said, light touch with the grandparents and those informals, but then we're identifying folks who might qualify for a program like this or would be interested.
Right, who want to make additional monies for that. And I don't know, would you consider on that attachment D, would you consider one of the program examples, the FFN from the First Five program? Because that's not in there, I was looking for it as well. So I would ask you to consider that as an additional program. So I thank you for your update on the 13 facilities that could be considered for licensed childcare. Do you know more or less, and I think you work extensively with Public Works, do you have those identified? I didn't see them in any attachment, or maybe I missed it.
We do. I did not attach those, but we can provide those to you, yeah.
That would be really interesting to learn, to see if maybe those are any of those facilities are the same ones that we have, are maybe our preschool programming, and if there's any maybe overlay with some of those facilities that will have licensed childcare. And then we have our recreation preschool, and they could also benefit from having some of those environmental changes or upgrades. I know you are all working on that in parallel right now. I think there's a lot of capacity building and civil service positions changes. But that would be wonderful if at the moment, because there's a lot of, obviously there's a lot of work. You said it takes a village, right, Jill? So there was a lot of work that you already have completed with Public Works folks and others. So I'm just wondering, would you be able to see if there is any overlay between recreation preschool?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Maybe we can add a couple of screws and a couple of cubicles or something like that, and maybe really upgrade some of those recreation preschool sites. Wonderful. So the last question I have. No, you answered it. Thank you. All right, so do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Wonderful. All those in favor? Those opposed? That moves forward. Thank you so much for this update. We look forward to seeing lactation pods and more reading groups. All right, so we're going to move into item 3, which is the annual community impact report from Parks, Rec, and Neighborhood Services. Interrupts our process.
They loaded them all. Is it
For those folks who are watching at home, because I know we have a large online presence and audience, we're having some technical issues we're working through. Just try to get our PowerPoint up and going. I wonder if we have music in between our presentations, just for the audience enjoyment, right? Oh, thank you. I love how colorful those things are.
Fancy.
Anytime you want to start.
Okay, thank you for your patience. Carolina Camarena with the Department of Parks, Recreation, Neighborhood Services. I'm the Public Information Manager, and Dave DeLong, our Acting Division Manager, is joining me. John Cicerelli is sitting right there. So let's begin with the reason why we're here. So we're going to start with some background. So in accordance with City Council pricing and revenue policy, every year PRNS is required to report out on our accomplishments in delivering financially sustainable programs and services. So this is done with a view towards identifying how well we achieve the cost recovery goals set in the city's fees and charges budget document, which the City Council approves each fiscal year. To that end, the Community Impact Report and presentation satisfies this obligation while highlighting how the department plans to move forward in light of our new strategic plan. And by the way, we did place copies of the Activate SJ plan for the public. A little bit about Activate SJ before we move forward. Activate SJ is our community-inspired plan, and it includes 5 guiding principles that speak to what San Joseans value in park and recreation system, beginning with stewardship in nature, equity and access, identity, and culminating in public life. This helps define how we view our operations. Now I'm going to go through a few highlights per each of the chapters in the Community Impact Report, and they also happen to be our guiding principles. So Activate SJ moves us from a building to a sustaining, yet we must acknowledge our past and the trust that San Joseans place in the Department of Parks, Recreation, and Neighborhood Services. Measure P provided a strong foundation for quality places by fully or partially paying for construction or improvements of 69 parks, 7 regional park projects, 9 community centers, and 5 trail segments. When we invest in infrastructure, we invest in people. From new parks to rehabilitated parks and centers, PRNS is meeting its new mission of connecting people through parks, recreation, and neighborhood services. And what does this look like for our public? Preschoolers are learning their ABCs in our community centers. Tweens continue to learn in after-school programs. Teens are engaged at teen centers. And adults participate in leisure classes while they stay healthy. And they connect and stroll, play with their family and friends in our parks. But we're not doing this alone. The community is part of the solution. San Jose ranks #1 in California for volunteerism. We think it has a lot to do with the many volunteer opportunities we offer for people of all walks of life, whether you are a retiree or a high schooler.
Did you say, Carol, did you say San Jose?
The metropolitan area in San Jose ranks #1 in California for volunteerism, and that is according to the Corporation for National and Community Service.
Well, that makes it,
Has a lot to do
That
with the
makes it
Department of
legit.
Parks, Recreation, and Neighborhood Services.
yeah, you carry us, Sergio.
The Beautify, thank you for the question, but the Beautify SJ initiative, which includes our anti-litter and anti-graffiti program, coordinated 787 anti-litter events last year. Staff and volunteers collected 57,322 bags of litter and removed close to 186 tons of debris from our streets and neighborhoods. And Beautify SJ includes grants, so groups can receive up to $5,000 in funding for beautification projects in their neighborhoods and in their specific communities. We're also protecting nature. So we're providing habitats for pollinators like bees. And that's not just an investment in nature, but also in our future. Pollinators are integral to the production of fruits, nuts, and vegetables. In addition to protecting nature, we are promoting natural areas for all people. For many people, we are their first experience with nature. For instance, for 25 of 2017s who went on their first trip to Squaw Valley in Tahoe, they had never seen snow before. And according to the Trust for Public Land, access to nature reduces stress and promotes socialization. And let's not forget, we have natural areas here in San Jose. Alum Rock Park will be celebrating 150 years in 2022.
Wow.
Keeping with the theme of Measure P funded facilities, Recreation of City Kids After School reached its 10-year anniversary, and in those 10 years, it has seen a tremendous growth. 260% more children are attending Rock After School, and we've more than doubled in locations from 11 to 26. Through San Jose Recreation Preschool, preparing children for kindergarten success in a safe and welcoming environment. And as you've heard, early education helps children have long-term success in school. But we're providing exceptional experiences for all. We host statewide competitions for wheelchair sports with our very own teams like Bascom Thunder and Wheels on Fire. San Joseans and residents of neighboring communities participate in these programs. Most recently, PRNS received $4.6 million from Santa Clara County to build all-inclusive playgrounds at Lincoln Glen, Almaden Lake, and Emma Prush Farm Parks, and to expand our first all-inclusive playground, Rotary Play Garden. But all access also means all languages. For example, outreach for the Emma Prush Farm Park Playground included focus groups with children at Mayfair Community Center and parents in Spanish. PRNS has unique programs that speak to our identity. We are an age-friendly city, and our generation-to-generation programs not only keep children safe, but they also address senior isolation, an epidemic that affects 40% of seniors. We manage the Mayor's Gang Prevention Task Force, an internationally recognized model to curb gang violence, gang-related activity, and transform our young people and their neighborhoods. The Female Intervention Team, part of the Mayor's Gang Prevention Task Force, focuses on young women. And our city bleeds teal. We have got to acknowledge our only outdoor rink at Roosevelt Community Center recently received a $500,000 renovation from the NHL. And then we have Project Hope, which builds on the principles of building community. With 3 neighborhood associations, we've hosted 60 litter pickup events with an average of 25 volunteers from the neighborhood at each event. Project Hope will expand to 6 additional sites for a total of 9 in 2020. And thanks to Measure P, we have premier facilities. We are providing welcoming places for people to gather, create memories, and make friends. Promoting arts and cultures in parks, we have partnered with Chopstick Art Alley for the past few years to host Vietnamese cultural events at the Japanese Friendship Garden. And we're trying new things like Brew at the Zoo to help adults connect with nature education. And of course, you all know our signature Open Streets event. Viva Calle SJ is now here twice a year, with the next one scheduled for May 17th and one in September. And with that, Dave?
Thanks, Carolina. As Carolina noted in our opening remarks, the Community Impact Report presents an opportunity to highlight our accomplishments in advancing our strategic objectives. This includes highlighting our financial sustainability efforts relative to a 40% cost recovery target that has been our reach number for a number of years now. In this slide, you'll see that in the last 3 fiscal years, the department has continued to build on its revenue generation success year over year, with about $22 million generated by PRNS programs and services in 2018 and 2019. In addition, relative to our overall operating expenses, the department was able to offset these costs with a total of $32 million, or approximately $32 million, in programming, grant, and tax revenues, equating to a 35.3% cost recovery rate last year. While ensuring financial sustainability is a key focus in our efforts to meet the public's needs and demands for our programs and services, PRNS is balancing this with our commitment to ensuring affordable access to the community as well. To illustrate this, PRNS has grown available scholarship funding from approximately $197,000 in 2011 to $1.2 million in 2019. And comparing just the last 2 years, the department increased scholarship usage from $884,000, that's 2018, to $1.2 million in 2019. That's nearly a $300,000 increase. That means that from one calendar year to the next, we're able to ensure affordable access to 1,900 more participants in programs such as camps, rocks, after school, preschool, and aquatics. So, as we invest in the lives of our community, we're also looking forward to investing in our future, including our infrastructure. And in 2019-2020, with the sale of the Coleman property proceeds, we were able to invest in some of the things that we have listed here. We're able to improve our reuse centers, repair playgrounds, sustain our park strike team, and then our work infrastructure backlog. We're trying to address that as capacity allows. In addition, we look to further explore opportunities to invest in our infrastructure and our programs and services going forward. We will be looking going forward to poll the community regarding a possible ballot measure in the future, testing their receptivity and their understanding of our parks issues. And with that, we could evaluate park fee programs and other funding feasibility options. That takes us to what we're doing in the near term under public life and providing welcoming places for people to gather and create memories and make friends. Just in the near term, starting in March 28th, we have the Arcadia Ball Fields grand opening. We have Camden and Seven Trees Community Centers Measure P anniversaries, so celebrating those investments. And then our Japanese Friendship Garden Tea House, we expect to open up in the coming fall. So we have a lot that's going on out there, a lot that's coming up, and we're celebrating our successes with this report. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you for the presentation. I don't have any comment cards, so I'm going to look to my Councilmember Jimenez.
I don't have any questions. I just wanted to commend you on all the work. You know, I used to sit on the Parks Commission for several years, but as you go through all this, I'm just reminded of how much you touch, this department touches the residents in many different ways. And I think it's one of the most, every department's important, but you are often the face of the city, and I'm very proud of everything you've done. Certainly, there's always things that we can do better and try to improve, but I'm just very happy to be part of the city and proud to have all of you working in the department doing everything you do for the residents. So thank you.
They are the most important department.
Thank you.
It's okay.
You can say it.
Say that louder.
It's
Say it
okay.
for the mic.
There's only Parks.
We have a cheering
It is
section.
on public record. All right, well, we're falling apart
Yeah, it's
here.
recorded.
It's recorded.
For posterity.
Councilmember Esparza.
Yeah, I just really just had a comment. I think this has come up to council, and it's been brought up a few times and in committees. I'm looking forward to the polling and getting the information for the bond that we so clearly need. And I also wanted to thank you for doing a lot with a little, and just having an amazing impact in our communities. So thank you.
Thank you. I have just a question about the scholarships. I'm just really amazed at the number of people who are taking advantage of this. I suspect that we'll have a higher need because of people's income lowering and potentially, needing to just really go out there and find a job. How will you, or do you have any plans in maybe adjusting this scholarship programming?
We are looking at scholarships as we go through the budget development process, so we're vetting that with the budget office, city manager's office as we move forward. So no news as of yet, but we are thinking about it.
In general, right? But with this, on top of this is also the coronavirus impact that'll have on our economy and our local economy. So will you also factor that in?
John Cicerelli, Director, Parks, Recreation, Neighborhood Services. I don't want to touch the microphone here.
Don't touch the
We haven't specifically considered that aspect, partly because our thinking goes along the lines of, in the event schools decide to close, we would not also provide programming for our youth because by then the Department of Health saying don't get kids together in groups. So there wouldn't be scholarship opportunities in that situation. But we're in this weird gray area in between, whether that's going to happen or not, nobody knows. And it hasn't come up as a subject yet for us to explore, but I feel pretty certain that if it was, we could access resources to help. Mm-hmm. We're looking at all kinds of plans. Primarily right now we're focused on senior populations and populations that might have immunocompromised systems, or otherwise abled folks. Those are the populations we're really kind of focused in on right now. Kids seem to be pretty resilient through the actual disease part of it, but the impacts their families yet, we still haven't sort of seen that or heard that, but if that starts to become an issue or participants start saying, I lost my job, I can't afford this, I think that's something we can try to work through the EOC and through the resources that flow through the EOC, because there's all kinds of resources that are going to be flowing around those other populations I just described. So.
Right. Well, I appreciate it if you could have a plan B for those families. As you said, we don't know, right? We just don't know. And I saw that you had your Viva Calles for May still set, and we don't know whether that will still work, right? We might be at a different place in our city and in terms of social gatherings. So for now, I think it works. Yeah.
If I could give you a little perspective from the EOC as well. So I'm actually specifically leading the team in the EOC that's developing the local assistance plan
great.
Framework and so we will be coming to council in a few weeks on that front. And so I'll take your comments back to the team as something that we need to add in to but we're going to have a robust discussion at council very shortly.
Great. Thank you so much, Michelle. My other question is, I think you said we're still on our target for March 28th for the grand opening. I know that we had already confirmed that. We talked about it yesterday. You don't foresee any changes because it's open air, right? I mean,
as I stand here right now,
social distancing in the field.
As I stand here right now, we have not canceled it. However, last night the federal government recommended down to groups of 250. The governor reiterated that this morning. Yesterday, our health department said, well, we don't think we need to go to 250, but then the governor said it and issued a proclamation about it, and I don't know what effects that have, but today we're seeing a lot of things close. Disneyland's closing, they canceled the NCAA tournament, NBA's canceled. All these big things are being canceled all around us. Even Broadway closed, I saw today. So all that's coming to a head, and what we anticipate right now in San Jose is that the number of cases we're going to see are going to go up, right? I think we're up to 3 or 4 firefighters now at this point. Obviously, the TSA agents were released yesterday, and then that affected all those people. So it's a rapidly evolving situation. My guess is we'll make a true call on it in the early part of next week. We're going to kind of see what evolves over the next few days. But right now, I wouldn't bet too high that we're going to have it. So that's
Yeah.
just the reality of the situation.
All right,
Now,
well,
that doesn't mean we wouldn't do something. We would
Right.
just have to postpone doing that, and we could have
Oh,
a celebration somewhere down the road.
absolutely, we can always celebrate. Can always celebrate. The last time, I'm just going to say this, love the colors, they're just so vibrant. Love the pictures in there, and I saw that, and I heard you say as well that you all went to Squaw Valley. And I got to tell you, when I was in STAM program, we only went to Strawberry to slide down some hillside, but Squaw Valley is definitely an upgrade. I'm glad that the kids had that kind of exposure, and ability to maybe learn how to ski or have a lesson, which I think is just amazing when you connect kids who've just been living in the city to the greater outdoors, and it provides a different kind of perspective in your place in the world. So thank you for continuing to do that. I don't think I have any more questions. Oh, Councilmember Jimenez.
I just wanted to ask, so in the report, I was just looking through it, and I saw it on the slide and the second page where it talks about the community centers built with Measure P funds. I think when we look at items, we're always looking at our district and, through a certain, through a lens as it relates to projects. And so I see South Side. Do we mean Edenville, or is that, was Edenville? It's Edenville, right? Yeah, because it says South Side. I just wanted to point that out. I don't think there's any Measure P in South Side. Correct. Yeah, it's one of the oldest community centers. So it probably isn't that. Anyway, I just wanted to point that out for whatever it's worth.
We'll confirm and make the correction. Thank you.
Wonderful. So, do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? So that moves forward. Thank you so much for the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The impact report looks beautiful. So we're going to move on to our last item, which is Project Hope and their annual report and expansion status update. Come on down. But
Hopefully that's good enough. Okay, Sergio. Okay, Sergio.
Whenever you're ready.
Are we ready? All right,
There we go.
let's go.
All right. Good afternoon, members of the council and members of the NSC committee. Mario Maciel, Division Manager for the Mayor's Gang Prevention Task Force. With me is our newest superintendent, Israel Conjura, and out in the audience is our fearless leader, John Cicerelli, for moral support. Anyways, I'll jump right into it if I may. Today, we're here to give our annual report on Project Hope, as well as our expansion status update. I'm so pleased to get this opportunity, council, to come and talk about Project Hope again, because I think we did ourselves a huge disservice the first time we came forth with Project Hope, in that we were quick to delineate a linear approach to working with community, as if there weren't other variables at play. And what I mean by that really is, and I know I'm singing to the choir when I say this, is that so much of the work that we're doing, particularly in Project Hope, is about equity. It is about respect and dignity and trust. And so many of our desires for progress have to compete with the fact that there hasn't been equity. There hasn't been trust in many of these communities, and a lack of respect and dignity, quite honestly. A great colleague of ours and supporter from the Department of Justice, and a longtime supporter of our city's juvenile justice reform work, Jack Ahoon, had over and over alluded to the fact that progress will only happen at the rate a community will accept, Moria. So many times we come in with our 5-phased approaches and are sometimes even asked, how quickly can you complete that? And I believe I made the erroneous comment about a year ago that, oh yeah, we can come into a Project Hope and go from phase 1 to phase 5 and be in implementation within a year. You know, not taking into consideration that these are humans that are at different levels of respect and trust for our systems, et cetera, et cetera. So I just wanted to take these few seconds to ground us in this reality, and I know I'm speaking to the choir with this committee. Secondly, I'd like to again reiterate our 4 outcomes. So much so, I guess, so that we can make sure that we don't have scope creep. The issues facing so many of these communities are so vast and so large that the desire to have Project Hope come in and possibly take on more than it can is something that I would really like to make sure we have a quick discussion. Project Hope was funded and targeted to address these 4 outcomes. The first obviously being to try to develop or strengthen some sort of organized semblance of community activists and community members that want to be their own advocates for their community. That we create a safer and cleaner environment to the extent possible. That we make sure that our residents are informed of the services that already exist in our city but are sometimes unequally used and distributed. And lastly, that we create partnerships that would assist them in sustaining this effort, because like so many past iterations of Project Crackdown, Neighborhood Revitalization Strategy, Weed and Seed, Strong Neighborhoods Initiative, our big effort has been, how do you make sure they can sustain themselves if and when city resources end? That being said, here's that linear plan that so many times we're quick to believe that we can jump in and accomplish within a set duration of time, when what we should be really talking about is the rate at which that community is ready and willing to move forward. Obviously, our utopian approach is to come in, meet with council, hire our staff, define boundaries, and do all that instrumental preliminary work. We develop our implementation teams, which are intradepartmental, with representatives from code enforcement, from housing, the police department, your offices, Parks and Rec, and any other department that could be brought to bear. The second phase is community mobilizing, assuming that we're coming into a community that needs to be reinvigorated, that community pride needs to be reestablished. Our hopes are to not only host these events for the purpose of hosting events, but actually to find our diamonds in the rough, as we call it. No matter how marginalized or how stressed these communities are, there are dynamic, beautiful, and intelligent leaders in these communities. And so, not only do we throw a good party, we start identifying those leaders so that we can move into phase 3, which is our community capacity building. We've developed what we call our Neighborhood Academy, which is a series of workshops that our diamonds in the rough come through in the hopes that they will be so empowered by the time they come out of that Neighborhood Academy that they would want to run for a board position within their newly established neighborhood association. Phase 4 is helping them launch their first meetings, run the meetings with them, and then to continue coaching them as we move forward with elections, nominations, and ultimately a brand new board. Many of the areas are on their second and third boards. Many areas are just starting, and Israel will be alluding to that. The last phase is the concept that at some point in time, we have to recognize the leadership that's been developed and allow our internal staff to focus on those new emerging areas that, quite honestly, need a lot more intensive support than, say, an area that is in year 3, year 4, and has already reaped some benefits. But I would like to allude that maintenance phase does not mean we leave. It still means we meet with them to plan every monthly association meeting. We attend every association meeting with them and any community events. But it does not mean that we would be there holding hands every single moment, as we do in those first initial phases. With that being said, to give you the status on where we're at with the 9 expansion sites, I'd like to pass it over to Israel Kanzura.
Yeah, so currently this is a map of where we're currently at. The existing sites are in black. We've been in Round Table, we're Welsh Park, as well as Winchester and Cadillac. And the new sites are Hammond Viamonte, Washington, Santee, Genie, Pokoway, and Foxdale. Usually we start at the top, but in this case, we're going to start at the very bottom, where the Cadillac Winchester and Welsh Park, they're in year 3. of their implementation phase. And so currently, you know, they are in that phase where we are working very light with them. They've already gone through a lot of the academies. They've had boards turnover already. So we're confident that those sites are moving in the right direction. We're still like meeting with them. We're still working with them, but not as much as, you know, we're still working with Roundtable. You know, they're still establishing. They're still like, you know, needing our help a little bit more. In terms of Pokaway, Santee, and Hoffman Viamani, what we've done there is that in Hoffman and Pokaway, we've already done surveying in those communities. We are currently in the Santee area doing surveys. They're the initial baseline surveys that we have established in this new iteration of Project Hope, something that we could not have done or we didn't do in the Winchester and Edenville Roundtable area as well as Welsh Park. And that was because of the fact that, you know, we weren't sure whether this program was going to continue, so therefore, you know, we couldn't do some of those things. And so now that we have the opportunity, we're taking advantage of that. The last sites, Jeannie Avenue, Washington, and Foxdale, those are the next sites, and quite frankly, we can't really start those sites until we are fully staffed. We are currently, I believe that the coordinator will start on the 23rd, and we are meeting with HR to discuss the CAW announcements that are going to go out so that we can actually recruit for 3 more CAWs for Project Hope.
On that note, you all funded us a team of 10 to take on the expansion of 9. We're currently a team of 4. But again, as Israel alludes to, the 3rd coordinator will come on, I believe, within a week. The community service supervisor interviews have been completed and an offer has been made. So we soon hope to be a team of 6 of 10, leaving us the 4 community activity workers, which are so essential to our success. They are where the rubber meets the road. But as you all know, there's been an influx of vacancies and HR has been beyond buried. And so here we are 10 months into the point where you all had funded this initiative to move forward in expansion, and we're still talking about hiring staff, unfortunately. That is our reality. This is the last slide of the day, and that really is just reaffirming the lessons that we've learned over the last couple of years, and that is that this work is so relationship-based. It cannot be a sterile approach where we come in and dictate that within a month or 2 we will move on to the next phase. To us, that is the opposite of true relationship building. So again, relationship-based, anchored in equity, trust, and respect. I think we've always known it. We're just verbalizing it and making sure we're just that more intentional about calling that out. Secondly, there was a time in our minds where we thought we would enter an area and actually leave, and that the work would be done. And even in our Winchester areas that are on their 2nd and 3rd boards, sometimes there's discourse even amongst the board members, and we need new emergency elections, and things continue to happen. The bottom line is that the work is cyclical. Volunteer fatigue in transient neighborhoods require new leaders to be regularly identified and trained. And again, this concept that these are 1 and 2 job working families that then are asked to come out as we paid employees show up to these meetings. It's just phenomenal to see the civic engagement that we're getting in these communities. And lastly, is that as we tap in, and a while ago, Councilmember Esparza, this concept of working with Jackie on enhanced code is exactly the kind of thing that we need to be looking at creative ways, because normal code enforcement, and poor Rita is being asked to come to 6 Project Hope sites, trying to bring to bear all these resources, and it's the same for PD, for housing, for code, for all our departments. The reality is that Parks and Rec has been funded to do Project Hope, and yet we're calling on so many of our departments to assist us in it that we've learned that they are a bit under-resourced. We have advocated that if they needed to write BDs mid-year last year, that John and I would support that effort. I am under the impression they could handle it at this point, because we're only at 3, maybe 6 sites. But as we embark on sites 7, 8, and 9, and with a little luck, even further in the future, I really hope that we can consider appropriately resourcing our code departments and others so that they can appropriately participate in this effort with us. With that, council, members of the committee, we're open to questions.
Thank you so much, Israel and Mario. Questions from my colleagues? Council members?
And I
Barca.
think we had a couple public comments, and a letter was written
Oh
by
my
our
gosh,
secretary.
yes, see,
I'm
I
sorry.
just got them, yes, thank you for that point of order. We always want to hear from our community before we hear from ourselves. So let's ask Maria Inés Ortega to come up to the mic and not touch the mic.
Hi, how are you? Good afternoon. Thus my language is in Spanish. I can a little bit of English, but okay. I'm vice president right now for the project. I'm in the community. I love this project because my life is a change. My passion is because my daughter, my kids, every single month support, and that the day that you need to clean up, go to clean up. My husband, and when I started, I love because I never scared. I never scared. And thank you for support my community because, you know, I see something in every community, connect, call the police, housing. I have a lot of, community support, and thank you. And I need to continue this project to help in a lot of communities. You know why? Because of safety for the community, for the kids. This is my passion, and please, never done the communities, the project of hope. Thank you for this community.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that, Maria Inés.
Something is for, you know, for my experience, starting this community for the fathers, the kids, is a love. The school and respect for the teachers, for, the people, and every days I say thank you, Mom, for your leadership in the community, for my partner, and a love for this community. And please, I need to teach single kids. Come with me, teach single day. This is my passion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We can definitely hear that. It's your passion. Thank you for sharing. Next, we have Maria Sid.
Am I tall enough? Good. Good afternoon, members of the NSC Committee. My name is Maria Sid, and I am a resident of the Cadillac-Winchester area in District 1. I am here today to speak to you all on behalf of my community in regards to Project Hope. And I want to take this opportunity to share my story about Project Hope's impact in my community. There are many ways that Project Hope has transformed my community for the better. Now there is a sense of community where before there was none. People are engaging and talking to each other through various community strengthening events, such as monthly litter pickups, Great American Litter Pickup, National Night Out, Dumpster Day, Neighborhood Watch, and resource fairs. People feel safer because, thanks to our neighborhood association, we have a relationship with our local beat officers. The neighborhood association serves as a forum not only for the police to share with the community what's going on in the streets, but it is also a chance for the community to share with our officers our concerns. This dialogue between the community and the police is very important, not to mention very special. Now we know of effective ways of holding City Hall accountable. For example, Project Hope has taught us to communicate with city departments such as the Department of Transportation, Housing Department, and Code Enforcement, to name a few. Project Hope creates an opportunity for anyone who lives in the city of San Jose to become an effective leader. People that never thought that they could had the capacity to make a difference not truly believe they can. I have been blessed to be a product of Project Hope, and I say that proudly. In closing, I want to strongly encourage you to consider continuing to support the Project Hope program. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sid. And last, we have Joanna Ortega.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Xochitl Montes. I'm the community coordinator for Project Hope for Cadillac, Santee, and Pokoway. I am going to read a letter on behalf of the secretary who, because is in school, was not able to attend.
And that would be Joanna.
That would be Joanna,
Oh, okay,
yes.
thank you.
Dear Neighborhood Services and Education Committee, ever since Project Hope was introduced, at first I had some doubts about joining because it wouldn't make a difference in my neighborhood knowing how the area is. As Greg Kahina and Elizabeth Guzman were the first people who taught us how we have help from the city if we just voiced our concerns that need to be resolved with the neighborhood. Not only Were we able to ask for help, but understand how manage and work with resources that are provided to us? It brought us to meet our neighbors and improve communication with each other and to other neighborhoods. The beginning wasn't as simple for us to start, but as time passed, with proper training and meeting new people, we were able to slowly become independent, doing it on our own. It might seem that we weren't fully completed in achieving our goals to making Cadillac Winchester neighborhood completely safe area, but right now, it's there more improvements than it was in 2016. There are patrols more often, lights installed for people to feel safer walking at night, more volunteers and litter cleanups. Parking has become a bit more easier to handle. Kids and teens are getting more involved, and a whole lot more things I can list. In fact, we are able to talk to people with Santa Clara County and even meet with other organizations outside of District 1. Without Project Hope, the neighborhood wouldn't have become a better area for people to feel comfortable and safe in the city if the city hadn't tried to outreach with neighborhoods that needed help. In the beginning, I was shy, quiet high school student who didn't know a thing about working in the community. It's hard to understand how a 16-year-old would make a difference being a female, Hispanic, a student trying to balance school, work, and community volunteering. Now I'm a person who will speak up for my neighborhood, learn to communicate with other people, and help others who want to make a change for their community. I was able to help my peers understand situations that are resources provided for them, fight for my education when certain challenges come my way, influence other kids from my neighborhood, and get involved in ways, and always put the community's safety as a priority, as first priority. Secretary, Cadillac Winchester Neighborhood Association, Joanna Ortega.
Thank you. Thank you for reading that and sharing that with us. She sounds amazing. Hopefully we'll meet her one day. Councilmember Esparza.
Thank you. I have a few questions and comments, and one of them actually is for the city manager's office. I'm a little frustrated about staffing issues. I think that came across in the policy priority setting process. And what is the city manager's office plan to facilitate hiring for positions like these?
Well, that's a little bit outside my wheelhouse today. I know it's something that our management team is looking at very seriously, and we've done a lot to enable the departments to have more flexibility to do their own hiring. And I don't know if John wants to, and his team wants to talk about how that's worked for them, but it is a big challenge. We are competing against a lot of other agencies as well as nonprofits and for-profits in the valley, and when you have a low unemployment rate. So I know the HR department is looking at that, and we can certainly get back to you with more details, but I think for PRNS specific, the director is probably the best person.
Yeah, this isn't a problem that's specific to just Project Hope and the hiring there. We have this across our own department and, of course, most departments in the city. So we have been working with HR on some additional budget asks this year to try to bolster that and bring in additional hiring staff, additional support. You know, just in this last year, through the budget process, we added more than 30 new positions, and we were already 60 or something vacant. So we understand the disappointment that oftentimes council members feel. They go, well, we gave you money for this back in July, and oh, look, here we are in March, and you're still not rolling. What's going on? Now, sometimes that isn't just a capacity issue. Sometimes we don't find the right people. Mm-hmm. We've done that with some recruitments where we go through them, or we make an offer and they don't accept. Now you got to start over, right? Yeah, and those things happen too. So it's not always just process. Sometimes it's the market working against you, or you're not finding who you're looking for and having to do it more than once. So that can string things out. But we share your frustration. We are trying to do that. Now, I don't know if the city manager has a larger citywide picture at this point. Right now, we've just been engaging on our own department level about what resources we think we would need to improve that for PRNS. But more to come. I mean, the city manager's budget is going to come out before too long, and we'll have a better sense, I think, of what extra resources may be going towards HR efforts.
Thank you. Yeah, and that was one of the things I brought up in the policy priority setting process, but I wanted to reiterate today is because what I'm hearing, not just in PRNS, but really across the city, the fact that we're in this sort of paradox where we need more HR people in order to hire people, right? And so it creates this backlog. So I'm really interested in hearing some more specifics about this. I think it's in departments like PRNS, which is so community facing. I mean, PRNS is probably the department that is the most part of the community, and many PRNS employees are actually San Jose residents. Plus, it's very community facing. But to me, it's also an equity issue, right? When we have issues like Project Hope or rec supervisors for programs that are the backyard for families that don't have one, right? That this is a really serious issue. And in communities like the communities on the map, it's life or death. And we see the impact when social cohesion drops. And it's not strictly just a Project Hope issue, but it's all of these services that are needed in the neighborhoods when we're not able to provide them. Really serious issues. These neighborhoods, as Mario and Israel know, can heat up really quick. And so having the staff necessary to do this work, to me, is critical. And I wanted to also comment, add on to your comment about the need as a city to be really honest about our commitment to these neighborhoods. These are not, and we've said this over and over again, these are not new neighborhoods to us. Whether you call it SNI or Project Crackdown or whatever it is, we know where the need is, and we really have to have an honest conversation about our commitment. And that it's not temporary, right? And I wanted to go back and, so you were here in my conversation with housing about code enforcement. Good. And I also, Jackie brought up also that we look at our city resources like the Mayor's Gang Task Force hotspots, Project Hope sites, but that we also look at the county special programs, whether it's NSU, Project Redwood, the community prosecutors. The county has a lot of different layers of programs that I think maybe we as a city, our frontline people are familiar with, but maybe the farther we go up, we're removed from kind of our awareness of knowing that there are other investments going on in these neighborhoods so that we can coordinate a little bit better, especially if it gives us more federal money for resources. It's worth making those connections. And so I had a question about how do you incorporate sort of the best agencies into this work? I'm new, so I'm still newish, right?
Yeah, you're still new.
Councilmember Jimenez. So how do you coordinate the best agencies into this work?
Well, Councilmember Esparza, that is a fluid type of let me just say, I don't think we have it formalized quite yet. Many of the best resources, some of which are school-based allocated, some are site-specific. I think we need to do an inventory to see which of the best services are actually allocated within a Project Hope site. Many are allocated within the region, but not necessarily on those particular streets or sites that Project Hope is in. But I do think that there is an opportunity that of the 20-some funded agencies, we could find that nexus. I do believe that we've called many of the street outreach teams. Many of these Project Hope committees have wanted to know, beyond law enforcement, what are we doing to engage our youth and what services are available. So we've obviously scheduled our street outreach teams to come give presentations, both our internal and our best funded agencies, to begin building that relationship with the community. But so many times our best funded agencies' relationships are with the AP or principal of that school site. Their contract is scoped to work with 30 kids on that site. And then we ask them to come out into the community, and we need to figure that out. Amendments to contracts, maybe more resources for them. And then maybe just tapping into the fact that they were a community-based organization that claimed to have always been focused on that community, funding or not, and bringing them to the table as partners.
And so are you going to include that aspect of it in the work plans once they're submitted?
Absolutely, Councilmember, and I think we just need to do a better job itemizing which best funded agencies are in which Project Hope areas and then formalize those relationships.
That would be helpful. Thank you. Then I had one more comment about, can you go over the information that the information that we use to establish a Project Hope site?
In this particular scenario, council member, as you know, the first three were allocated in the, I'm not going to use a hodgepodge approach, but it was Councilmember Jones had first initiated Winchester Cadillac. Then I believe it was Sergio and then Sylvia. At that point, we were getting teams allocated one at a time. When council became serious about bringing this to scale, and we put forth a proposal for all 18 sites, a proposal for 6 sites, and a proposal for 9. 9 were selected. And then the obvious next question would be, of the 18 gang hotspots, well, which are next? At that point, quite honestly, Councilmember, all 18 hotspots had been always seen as equal, you know, and we had never been put in a position where resources were being brought forth that weren't expansive enough that we couldn't lay a blanket over all 18. This was the first time we had been challenged with partial expansion, thus needing to prioritize these areas and make tough decisions. So what we did was our best approach early in this world of equity screening. Council member, we asked for data from all our stakeholder partners so that we could rank the current 18 spots on variables such as PD data, crime response, calls for responses, aggravated assaults. We went to public health and got economic standing, poverty levels, educational levels for those areas. We went to probation and got number of probationees, number of parolees. We went to graffiti, got square footage of the amount of graffiti. We went to our intervention programs and looked at as many, I believe it was 11 variables that we brought forth from all our stakeholders. Ranked all 18, we're able to then quantify and cumulatively put a ranking to these. 5 of the 6 used equity screening, and 1 Project Hope area was put forth in the budget, which was Hoffman Viamani would come forth of the 6, and to use an equity lens for the additional 5. Those additional 5 were Pokaway, Santee, Foxdale, Genie, and Washington soon. So that's how we did it.
And when, what was the time frame for the statistics that you compiled? Like, when were the statistics dated?
They were a year prior to our starting. I had asked for the entire year prior to.
So what date was that? What year?
I'd have to go back, council member. I believe it's going to be probably 18, 19.
Okay. The reason I'm asking is because in this sort of era of national politics, looking at calls for service and reports on a lot of issues, to me, isn't totally indicative of what is happening in a neighborhood. We're in a new era where a lot of these neighborhoods are not calling the police. I've seen this in Seven Trees. It's a big issue, as you know, and thank you for coming to a community meeting, A-Style, but where we've had some really, really serious life and death issues go on in a neighborhood, and no one has called the police.
Absolutely.
And they're not calling them for sort of day-to-day things either. And so we're kind of grappling how to deal with that, but not exclusive to Seven Trees. In other parts of District 7, and I'm actually hearing in other parts of the east side, you have residents who aren't going to church, which is a first for me. I've not seen that before. Churches in my district have had to cancel like Spanish Mass and things like that because people aren't going. There are issues in terms of food distribution, particularly in the Latino community throughout District 7. It's a source of frustration because people are afraid to accept assistance. They're hungry, but they're afraid to accept food. And so it's this new era where the disconnect between a community, particularly a community of concern, and the authorities at whatever level, right? Not just this here at the city, but at every level, that disconnect to me is getting wider and wider in some parts of the city. And I bet if we kind of dug in a little bit deeper, we would find that in a large number of sites, Project Hope or Mayor's Gang Task Force throughout the city. And so I just want to challenge the team to think about that moving forward, that and to connect maybe with other resources. But it's a big issue. It's a big issue in these communities who are feeling more and more like they don't have anybody to turn to.
Absolutely, council member. That one variable alone would have given us a whole different indication if that was all we used. Our attempt was to use multiple data sets, but I completely hear you, because many of the communities that we've historically worked in just will not call. We've had homicides in apartment complexes where not a single call for, it's just an officer was coming by to find a body, and I can't believe that the sound of gunshots in a high-density area would result in 0 calls, but that's what our captains let us know all the time.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yep. Yeah, I'm hearing the same thing. Okay, thank you.
I have just one question about, this is something we talked about, John, when we think about the sustainability of programs that are so essential in high-need areas, and I know you've recognized it in your report, you've stated as this is cyclical, right? Because the same risk factors continue to exist through generations. And so I know that there's folks that, through my experience with Project Hope, I was in Project Crackdown and Blossom, the best type of staffing comes from the community, right? Myself, I hired the president of our neighborhood association for, I think it was about 6 months or 9 months. And obviously, we recruited one of your best in District 1, Maria Sid. And I think, that these are excellent hires for what they're supposed to do, which is help revitalize this neighborhood, and who better to do that than the people who live there, right? And one of the frameworks that has worked over time, and we've seen it in Mayfair, even before Mayfair was, Somos Mayfair, was just the Mayfair Initiative, is the Promotoras framework, because we understand that there is an income impact to residents' investment of time, right? Either they're not working, or they're not with their family, or and so I think this Promotoras framework allows for us to honor the investment that our families are making by participating in Project Hope and being part of this revitalization. I know that it's just self-fulfilling. I could hear in the voice of the folks who came in and provided testimony, but also honors the work, right? In a way that, a meal is really nice at a meeting, but when you have a little bit of green in your pocket and you could provide something that you couldn't otherwise to your children or to those who are under your roof, that's also very significant. So I am really hoping that we can work on maybe folding in some of this framework for sustainability reasons, and also because of hiring. We're having this issue with hiring. Who better if we identified the people within our own community to do that, right? And we had a framework that actually works, which is the Promotoras. We've seen it's tried and true. I would love to explore that in my own Project Hope site and see what that would look like. I think, as you've been in the city for a really long time, Mario, you've been here for Project Crackdown.
You're aging.
PC,
You're aging.
before Project Crackdown, or PH before Project Hope. And you've seen these neighborhoods continue to deal with some of the issues, like we see Poco Way, right? Even if you have this revitalization, unless you leave this sustainable framework, it's just going to create these cycles. And we know because, like you said, some of these communities are very transient, or for whatever reasons, right? There's incomes, there's obligations at home. So I think that we're kind of at a cusp where you need to create something a little different, right? And so I'm hoping that we can consider the promotoras framework within this and see if that injects any change. Maybe you'll get your promotoras or promotores that way, right?
Well, council members, on that note of sustaining these boards, we are looking at best practices. I think we're going to be looking at the promotoras model also, but Eastside Peace Project also has found a way to stipend their community board members to a point where it doesn't impact benefits or any. We also don't want to hurt our residents because
Right.
at a certain point of compensation, it becomes
Right.
W-4 forms and all that other stuff. So.
Right.
I think we need to look creatively at best practices because somehow they found through a foundation a way to get just exactly like $499.99 in a food gift card or something of that nature. So that is definitely a priority because how far can you go on just volunteerism? I mean, obviously we're getting very far, but could we get sustainable boards if we could compensate just a little bit?
Right. It may start out that way,
Yeah.
right? It might
Well, a board
start
of
out like
five would cost
volunteer.
us like $2,000-3,000 to subsidize for the whole year,
Yep.
and I don't think that's too much to ask.
Right.
It's in our current non-personal budget. It's just whether or not we're allowed to use funds that way that we're gonna have to figure out.
Yeah.
I don't think we would be asking for additional funds for that.
Yeah.
I think
Or-
we'd just permission to do so.
Right, or bringing in an agency that can actually do it
Yeah.
under their umbrella, right, rather
Yeah,
than ours.
that's what we did with Valley Medical Foundation is helping the Eastside Peace Project, and the monies are coming through the foundation to kind of alleviate
Yeah.
issues, so.
Yeah,
we'll
yeah,
look
they're
into
the
it,
fiscal
for sure.
agent. Yeah, absolutely. I just think that these neighborhoods, like we've said, when you layer over all these conversations of income, of property management and blight and quality of life, they're the same locations. It's no coincidence, right? And you've said it really well, Councilmember Esparza. So we have to go at this, I think, a little more creatively. I know that you all have been doing your best in providing that support. It's a lot. It's a lot. It's our neediest communities, right? We're not asking you to support, our estates neighborhood. We're asking you to support the most, neediest of our members. And so I applaud you for the work that you're doing. I know it's hard work, and I can see the benefits because I see the great staff and the folks that come in and speak on your behalf. And so thank you. Thank you for what you do. All right, do I have a motion?
Second.
All in favor? Those opposed? Okay, so this moves forward. Thank you so much. And that, unless, we have, this is our last item, and we have an opportunity for open forum. So if you're here and would like to speak on anything other than what's been on our agenda, you have 2 minutes. Seeing that there isn't anybody grabbing that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.